Hey, remember that time you were trying to set up a home theater system in the living room and kept hearing that boomy bass that makes every movie feel like a cheap drive-in? I've been there, and I know the hesitation spending a decent chunk of cash on a subwoofer that either overwhelms the room or disappears into the background. If you're on the fence about whether a dedicated sub is worth the hassle, stick around. The link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So, let's talk about the Monitor Audio Vestra W10. It's a 10-inch sealed box sub that claims 250 watts of Class D power, and it's marketed as a compact, low-profile solution for everything from cinema-style movies to intense gaming sessions. What I'm going to do is walk you through how it actually behaves when you plug it into a typical mid-range AV receiver, what kind of room it works best in, and who should seriously consider it versus who might be better off looking elsewhere. First off, the biggest draw here is the minimalist design. The matte black enclosure is small enough that it can sit on a bookshelf or blend into a wall shelf without screaming subwoofer. That's a relief if you're trying to keep a sleek aesthetic in a modern living room or a gaming den that already has a lot of visual clutter. In my own setup, I placed the W10 on a low console under my TV, and because the driver is sealed, the unit doesn't require the extra space that a ported box would. It stayed relatively quiet when the bass was idle, which means you won't be hearing that low-frequency rumble at night unless you actually want it. The real test, though, is how it handles the kind of content most people care about: movie explosions, synth-heavy music, and that punchy bass line in a first-person shooter. Thanks to the High-Excursion 10-inch CCM driver, the W10 delivers a deep, controlled bass that is more about authority than sheer volume. In a 12-foot by 12-foot room, I found that the low end was surprisingly tight. Explosions in action movies felt impactful without turning the curtains into a wobble zone. When I cranked a bass-heavy track from a modern electronic album, the sub gave enough thump to feel the rhythm in my chest, yet it never morphed into an overboosted mess that masks the rest of the audio. What really differentiates this model is the built-in DSP presets. Monitor Audio gives you a handful of modes like movie, music, and game that you can select with a single button on the sub's front panel. Those presets adjust the internal crossover and phase alignment, which means the sub integrates more naturally with the main speakers on whatever source you're feeding it. I tried the movie preset during a film night, and the bass felt cohesive, seamlessly filling the gap between the floor-standing speakers and the center channel. Switching to music gave a tighter, more rhythmic feel, which is perfect for jazz or classic rock where you want the low end to add body but not dominate. Now, let's get into the practical side of everyday usability. The Vestra W10 is compatible with 99% of receivers and amplifiers, which is a polite way of saying it has a standard line-level input and doesn't need any special configuration beyond setting the sub's volume and phase. That low-effort setup is a big win for anyone who doesn't want to tinker with advanced calibration tools. However, there's a hidden trade-off. Because it's a sealed design, the low-frequency extension isn't as deep as a larger, ported model would be. If you measure the response, you'll see the roll-off starts around 40 Hz, which is fine for most movies and games but could leave a tiny gap for bass enthusiasts who love those sub-30 Hz rumblings you hear in high-end audiophile rigs. Who should buy this? If you're a gamer who wants a solid, no-fuss bass boost that works well with a 2.1 or 5.1 surround sound setup, the W10 ticks the box. Its size lets you slip it under a desk or behind a console without needing a dedicated bass cabinet. If you have a modestly sized room, think a bedroom, a small studio, or a compact home theater, the sub provides enough depth to make movies sound cinematic without turning the entire room into a shaking box. Also, if you're a first-time subwoofer buyer who's wary of boom boom, the built-in DSP presets and the sealed enclosure give a controlled experience that's easy to get right. Who should skip it? If you have a big open-plan space, a dedicated home theater room, or you already own a high-end floor-standing speaker system that can handle low frequencies, you might feel shortchanged by the W10's modest extensions. Audiophiles who chase the sub-30 Hz floor-level rumble will probably want a larger, ported sub that can move more air. Also, if you're planning to drive a power-hungry system with multiple satellite speakers, a single 250-watt sub may not keep up with the collective demand for deep bass, and you might need a more powerful model or a pair of subs. A practical weakness I noticed is